Hi, Isabel.
Hi.
Good to see you again today. Thanks
Good
for
to
coming.
see you too.
So we have another lesson today on a different topic. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to start that topic with a question.
Sure.
All right, here we go. Question is, Isabel, what is your watershed address?
Huh? What does that mean?
Well, let's break it down. We'll start with the water part. That's pretty easy. What's an address?
Well, I guess it's how people know where I live. If my friend wants to send a letter to me, they'd write my address on the envelope, and the post office would know where to take it from there.
Yeah, that's right. So if I were to show you this, what is this?
Well, that's a map of Massachusetts, of course.
Yeah, of course. So if I show you this map, can you point to where you live?
Well, sure. I live right around there, in Carlisle, Massachusetts.
Yes, I see that. So I guess part of what you'd tell me is, if I wanted to know your address, is that you'd say that you live in Carlisle, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So let's say that I didn't know where you lived, and I was coming from a long way away. Part of what you'd tell me is that I live in Carlisle, Massachusetts, and that would allow me to figure out, at least close, how to get to where you are.
Yeah, exactly.
So, let's pretend. What if we lived a long, long time ago, before there was anything called Carlisle, or anything even called Massachusetts for that matter? And let's try this again. If I was coming from a far distance, how would you go about explaining to me how to find you?
Well, since there weren't towns or states back then, I guess I'd have to tell you where I lived based on certain features of the land that we both recognize.
Yeah, exactly right. And one of those kind of features that are oftentimes used are the locations of the places where water collects, like lakes and rivers and ponds and things like that. So all of those things taken together in a particular area of the land define what is considered that land's watershed. So I guess you might be able to tell me where you live by giving me your watershed address. That is, the watershed that you live in.
Well, yeah, I guess so. I understand the address part, but I'm still a little confused on what watershed means.
Yeah, well, kind of like we did before, let's do that again. And let's take watershed, and can you break that down into two words that are familiar?
Sure, water and shed.
Yeah, sure. So again, we got the water part, and that's pretty easy. And that leaves us with shed. What do you suppose we mean here by shed?
Well, a shed is the little building next to my garage that my dad keeps all the stuff he doesn't want in the house. But I don't think that's what you're looking for here.
Yeah, that's a really good guess. And a lot of people think of a shed in that way. And you're right, that's not the way we're using the word shed in this case. Can you think of another way that the word shed might be used?
Well, when my cat walks around the house, sometimes little pieces of her fur come off. I think that's another word for shed, right?
Yeah.
My cat sheds her fur.
Yeah, exactly right. So, do you think that nature sheds?
That's crazy. Nature doesn't have fur.
Yeah, you're right. Nature doesn't have fur like your cat. But is there anything else in nature that it might shed?
Well, I'm not sure.
So, let me give you a hint. Let's go back to the lesson that we did before on the water cycle. Can you remember the four main parts of the water cycle?
Sure. There's precipitation, collection, evaporation, and condensation. Could collection or runoff be thought of as how nature sheds water?
That's exactly right. So nature doesn't have fur, but it does shed water in the form of water collection. So instead of dividing up the land into towns like we do, nature divides land up into watersheds. So if you travel from one town to the next, it's not too hard to figure out. There's usually signs and things that help you figure that out. But how do you suppose we know when we go from one watershed to the next?
Well, I'm not sure, since there wouldn't be signs like there are between towns.
Yeah, right. So, to help us with that part, we have a little model here of a part of a watershed. You want to come have a look?
Yeah.
So, I'd like you to, if you would, pick up that watering can, and I would like you to pretend that you're a big rainy storm cloud. And you're floating over the land, and you float over this part of the watershed, and all of a sudden there's a cloud burst, and you start to rain on the front side of the hill. Yeah, just like that. All right. Now, what can you tell me? What happened to the water? What happened to the rain as it fell down and fell down to the land?
Well, it fell on the hill and it collected in a little pond at the bottom.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe like into a little lake or something at the base of the hill. So let's try this once more. So this time you're going to be a big rain cloud, and you're going to float over the land, but slightly different. In this case, you're going to float across the back part of the hill, and it starts to rain. All right, so let's think about those two. What can you tell me? What's different about them?
Well, if the rain falls on the front part of the hill, the water collects towards the front of the hill.
Yep.
But if you pour the water on the back part of the hill, it collects on the back side of the hill. So the water is separate.
True enough. So what do you suppose is different about the land on the front side of that hill as opposed to the land on the back side of that hill?
Well, I guess there must be two different watersheds.
That's exactly right. So that is how nature goes about defining different watersheds. If you look at the high points in the land, and you use those high points to figure out which way the water's going to flow as it strikes the surface, the water's always going to concentrate in a particular place. That's going to define your watershed. So this model here really provides us a boundary between two different watersheds.
Wow, that's so cool.
So, to wrap this up, here I have another map. And once again, I'll ask you, what is this a map of?
Well, it's another map of Massachusetts, but this one is divided into different sections. They're not towns, and they have names that I don't recognize.
Yeah, you're right. Turns out that this map takes the state of Massachusetts, and rather than towns, this map divides the state of Massachusetts into its watersheds. If you were to look at this map, could you tell me what your watershed address is?
Well, I guess I would tell you that I live in the Suasco watershed, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah, that's kind of a funny word, isn't it? Well, it turns out that in this area there are three main rivers. Do you know what they are?
Well, the Assabet,
Yep.
the Sudbury,
Yep.
and the Concord.
That's right. So this particular watershed has three different rivers in it, and you're correct in that it's the Sudbury, the Assabet, and the Concord rivers. And so basically what they did was they took a couple of letters from each of those rivers' names, and you get SU for Sudbury, AS for Assabet, CO for Concord, Suasco.
Wow, that's so cool. Thank you so much for teaching me about this today.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I'm glad you were able to come, and that's it for now. So once again, I want to thank you all for coming today, and hopefully by being here you learned a little bit about watersheds. And if you move on over to the website, like the other lessons, you'll find activities, lots of different activities on the topic of watersheds, a place where you can submit your work for us to have a look at and to perhaps post on the website, and a place to ask questions and make comments. So once again, thank you for coming to another of the virtual WaterWise workshops, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.